My wife picked up the phone while my wife and I were in bed. She then turned to face me and said, "I think you should get up, sit on the end of the bed, and answer the phone. The world lost its favorite princess on August 31st, 1997. Princess Diana was known as the people's princess while she was living, and that name stuck after she died. Her close friends and family will always remember her. One of them has finally spoken out about how she died. Colin Tebbutt did more for Diana than just drive her around. His friendship with her made him one of the few people who really knew what happened that terrible night in 1997. Also, he told them the horrible things that happened days after her death in the accident. What shocking things did Colin say? Also, why did he wait so long after she died to talk about the accident live on TV? Relax, because what's coming next will shock you more than anything you've ever heard. What did you do that night? She died in a car accident in Paris almost 30 years ago. Colin Tebbutt, who was her favorite driver, is one of many people who are very sad about her death. Colin was a guest on a talk show lately that Kate and Ben were in charge of. Colin found it hard to hold back tears as he talked about the terrible things that happened after Princess Diana's car accident. The host knew that since her death, he had been haunted by a terrible sense of duty and guilt that he wasn't the one driving that night. Colin started by talking about how he learned about the crash. The phone rang while he and his wife were in bed. The caller was his wife, and at first it looked like a normal chat. But then the call's tone changed and became very serious. His wife gave Colin the phone and told him right away to sit up and answer it, without saying a word. You might be curious about how Princess Diana really died before we tell you what happened on that one phone call. Colin has been sad for decades. Princess Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris's Pont de l'Alma tunnel on August 31st, 1997. The terrible thing happened as the driver tried to get away from the photographers. Diana was killed in the crash, along with her friend Dodi Fayad and their driver Henry Paul, who was also the security head at the Hotel Ritz Paris. But one person, Trevor Rees-Jones, was able to stay alive. He was Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayad's guardian. Trevor got a serious head injury in the accident, but he lived. Diana was laid to rest on September 6, 1997, and a memorable one. The whole world was interested in talking about it. People in the UK watched the funeral on TV, and at its peak, 32.1 million people did. This made it one of the most watched events in the history of British TV. The most people watching TV at one time in the United States was 50 million. Over 200 countries watched the funeral live, and about 2.5 billion people around the world saw it. Princess Diana was a well-liked royal figure, and when she died, suddenly world leaders spoke out. A lot of people shared moving tributes that showed their sadness and respect. A lot of people went to Kensington Palace for months and left flowers, candles, cards, and personal notes. Many people said these things to show how much Diana meant to them. Her body was taken back to London from Paris on August 31st, 1997, with the royal flag wrapped around it. The coffin was followed by her two sisters and Charles, her ex-husband. Diana's body was first taken to a private morgue in London after she died. After that, it was taken to St. James's Palace's Chapel Royal. This trip marked the start of a time when people all over the country would mourn and remember. Not only that, Queen Elizabeth II paid tribute to Diana with a live TV speech on September 5th. Diana was laid to rest at Westminster Abbey the next day, on September 6th. During the funeral, her sons walked behind her coffin. The Prince of Wales, the Duke of Edinburgh, Diana's brother Lord Spencer, and people from some of her causes joined them. Lord Spencer talked about his sister during the service. He said that in her last year she had shown that she didn't need to be a princess to make magic happen. In 1997, Elton John sang Candle in the Wind, a version of his song that had been changed to remember Diana. It was one of a kind because it was the only time he sang this song live. When the single came out later in 1997, it sold all over the world and made money for Diana's charities. Many ideas have come up about Diana's accident since the day she died, and some of them are so crazy you won't believe them. Both British and French investigations proved that Diana died after a car accident in Paris, as reported in the news. In 1999, France did an investigation and found that Diana died in the crash. Judge Herve Stephan, a French investigator, said that the paparazzi were not close to the Mercedes S280 when it fell and were not to blame for the death. In 2008, at a British inquest, the jury found that Diana's death was illegal because of what the driver, Henry Paul, and the paparazzi following the car did. The judges also said that the deaths were caused by people not wearing seatbelts in the car hitting a pillar in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, not by something else. A lot of people don't believe the official story about how Diana died. The British newspaper, the Daily Express, was a well-known critic. An Egyptian businessman named Mohammed Al-Fayed also died in the crash. His son Dodi was Diana's boyfriend and also died in the crash. Diana's butler, Paul Burrell, showed off a note that he said Diana wrote in 1993 in 2003. Diana is said to have written in this note that her husband was planning a car accident to hurt her badly enough that he could get married again. In October 1995, Diana is said to have told her lawyer, Lord Mishcon, about similar worries. She said that trustworthy people had told her that she and Camilla would be sent away so that Charles could marry Tiggy Leg Bork. At that time, the Anglican Church did not let separated people get married again. This rule stayed in place until it was changed in 2002. The Metropolitan Police set up Operation Paget in 2004 as a special investigation team to look into the many ideas about how Diana died. Officer John Stevens was in charge of this group, which looked into 175 different plot claims made by Muhammad al-Fayed. During the 2005 investigation, Charles was asked to give his side of the story. He told her that he didn't know about the note she had written in 1995 and didn't understand how she felt. During the investigation, al-Fayed kept pushing the idea that the crash was the result of a plot. He was sure that his son Dodi and Diana had been killed. Let's go back to that call that made Colin speechless. Come back to England. Someone from Balmoral was on the other end of the call. This worker told Colin that Princess Diana was hurt in a car accident. Someone else at work told Colin to watch TV to find out what had happened. Colin turned on the TV because he was told to. The terrible news about the crash was on the screen for him. What he was seeing shocked him very much. He quickly dressed up and went to Kensington Palace. Cole felt a lot of strong feelings as he drove to Kensington Palace. The news shocked and hurt him a lot. He also felt useless because he could not change what had taken place. As soon as Colin got to Kensington Palace, he saw how terrible things really were. He thought Princess Diana's situation would be worse than it was, and what he saw broke his heart. As Colin talked about that night more and more, the chat show conversation became more intense. He talked about the moment he knew Princess Diana's illness was really bad. It was clear that what happened that night had a big effect on him. He still felt guilty and responsible for what happened all these years later. Colin felt a lot of emotion during the conversation. When he found out about the accident in the middle of the night, it turned what should have been a normal evening into a nightmare. He felt very bad about what was going on when he saw the news on TV, and he had to get to Kensington Palace right away. As he talked, it was clear that Colin was feeling very sad about not being able to stop the tragedy. Kate and Ben, the hosts, listened with warmth and understanding. They were kind and asked Colin about his life to help him talk. Colin was given a really tough job to do. He had to take Princess Diana's body from Paris back to England. This was a big duty that made him feel even worse about how he was feeling. Even though he was sad and felt like giving up, he had to stay strong and focused. Things were completely crazy when Colin got to Paris. The media's excitement was crazy. There were reporters and photographers everywhere, all trying to get a look at the sad story. It was tough to get around in all the chaos and crowd. The media's attention made things even harder. One of the hardest things for Colin was seeing Princess Diana's body in the morgue. He was hit hard by the fact that she had died. He had a terrible experience that he couldn't put into words. He was very sad and felt like he had lost a lot. Seeing her there, dead, was very different from the lively and caring person he knew. Even though he was feeling very upset, Colin had to keep his cool and emotions in check. To honor Princess Diana's memory in the best way possible, he knew he had a job to carry out. It was a sign of love and respect to bring her body back to England. He felt he had to make the hard trip, even though it was hard. Colin had a lot of problems as he tried to figure out how to bring Princess Diana's body back. First, it was hard to plan everything, and the media's pressure didn't help. Colin was determined to do his job with respect and care, no matter how hard things got. During this time, Colin felt like the people around him were there for him. A lot of people cared about and loved Princess Diana, and they worked together to help in any way they could. Being able to grieve together with other people was a small comfort during a very sad time. The worst trip was the one back to England. Colin felt the weight of duty on his shoulders as he traveled with Princess Diana's body. When they got to England, it became even clearer that Princess Diana had died. Everyone in the country was sad, but Colin still had work to do. There were still a lot of things that needed to be done to get ready for Princess Diana's funeral. He kept working hard to make sure that everything was done with the greatest care and respect. After Princess Diana's death, the days that followed were full of sadness, thought, and a strong desire to remember her memory. Colin didn't find love in Paris during this hard time. He saw it as the city of problems. The city, which is usually so lively and full of life, felt strange and intimidating at this point. The first problem Colin had was that he didn't speak the language. Even though Paris is a global city, not everyone speaks English very well. Colin had a hard time communicating with the French medical staff and officials. It seemed like every talk took more work than usual, which added to his stress. Thankfully, Colin wasn't the only one having trouble with the words. He had a lot of mental support from his wife being by his side. Being around her brought peace in the midst of the chaos. She gave him a steady hand and always made him feel better. Colin felt strong when he was feeling stressed because she was able to stay calm and helpful. Someone from the military also helped Colin. This person served as a go-between and helped Colin understand the steps he needed to take and deal with the problems that came up because of red tape and logistics. The attache's presence was very helpful because he made sure Colin could do his job without getting sidetracked by paperwork. The scene at the hospital where Princess Diana was taken will never be forgotten. As Colin made it clear, the doctors and nurses were doing everything they could to help, but it was clear that they needed to get things done right as soon as possible. People from both France and the UK were there. These officials were there to keep an eye on things, make sure the right steps were taken, and help out where it was needed. A lot of people from the community also came to the hospital. Not famous people came to honor and support the person who had died. Their faces showed the shock and sadness that everyone else was feeling. Some people were praying quietly while others were crying out loud. Colin was right in the middle of this storm. Seeing Princess Diana's body in the hospital morgue was something he would always remember. Also, the confusion outside the hospital stood out. Reporters and photographers were yelling at him to give them information and take pictures. The press was all around the hospital. They were bothersome with their flashing cameras and questions. Again, at that moment, Colin knew he had a big job to do. More ideas about conspiracies. Colin thought it was important that Princess Diana was treated well. She was being held in a very hot room, and Colin was afraid that someone would try to look in and see her. He made sure the room stayed cool and that no one could peek in. Colin wanted to keep her honor even after she died. It was his job to make sure everything was done right so Diana could rest alone and peacefully. Colin had a lot of stress. Even though he was feeling a lot of different things, he had to be very serious. He had a very hard time at one point. He was with Diana in the room, which had a fan on to keep it cool. That moment when the fan moved Diana's hair shocked Colin. He had to calm down and tell himself to keep working. Colin was stressed out and sad, but he was still determined to do his job well. Colin also talked about how he felt about Princess Diana on the show. He thought of her as having a great sense of fun. They got along great. He liked working with her too. His grief was very strong after she died. It was very hard to lose her because she was such a nice and great person. Colin felt like he had lost Diana, and not just because he was doing his job. He really cared about her. She had been very important to him, and her death had changed his life. One more problem to solve, which was having to deal with a lot of questions and stories about what really happened in the crash that killed Princess Diana. The ideas we've talked about so far are just a few of the many beliefs. You can only imagine how many annoying rumors Colin had to deal with. People were interested in what happened and why it happened. People had a lot of ideas and stories about what happened, and some thought there was more to the crash than what was being said. Colin chose to talk about what had happened to him. He talked about what it was like to drive through the tunnel where the crash happened. It might be hard to figure out how to get out of the tube at night. There were lights from the city that made it dark and hard to see. Colin said that that tube could make even the most careful driver feel lost. Colin noticed how easy it was to get lost as he drove through the tunnel. There were lots of turns on the road, and the tunnel walls felt like they were closing in on you. While not paying close attention, it was simple to get lost. It wasn't easy for Colin to get people to understand how to drive in that tube. He said it could be hard to see what was ahead because of the lights from the cars and the glow from the tunnel walls. For someone going fast, this could be very bad. Colin told people this to help them understand that the crash may have been caused by how hard it was to drive in the tunnel and not by something strange or evil. As a matter of fact, Colin remembered getting lost the first time he drove through the tunnel. That was his way of telling people that it was easy to get lost there. Along with the turns and twists, the play of light and shade made it a tricky place to drive. He stressed that even a short moment of misunderstanding could cause a very bad accident. Colin hoped that by talking about his own experience, the rumors would become clearer. He wanted to show that the crash might have been an accident because of how bad the weather was for driving. His story made him think that it might help other people see things more clearly. People should know that sometimes accidents happen because of the weather and not because of some secret plan or reason. Cole knew that many people had different thoughts about what went wrong. He knew people wanted answers, but he also wanted to tell them the truth. He really wanted people to understand that tragedies can happen for very easy reasons. Colin then talked about how hard the medical team worked in Paris. As one of the doctors, Dr. Monf Damon used all the most up-to-date medical equipment to carry out emergency surgeries with his team. They did everything they could to help her very quickly and carefully. Dr. Damon and his team had to move quickly because he knew Princess Diana was in very bad shape. Time was running out. The doctors knew that each and every minute was important. The people who were trying to save her life did everything they could, and even though they tried hard, Diana still died and the world lost her. The doctors were asked so many questions after the princess died that they couldn't answer them all. People thought that something else might have been able to be done. This close attention made Dr. Dahman and his team feel heavy. Even though they worked very hard, some people still blamed them. They had tried everything and this was still hard for them. Dr. Dahman still thinks about the terrible night Diana died, just like Colin does. Moving on meant that he and the medical team would always remember what they had learned that night. The same care and commitment went into their work as before, always remembering Princess Diana and how hard they worked to save her. Later, after Princess Diana was buried, more shocking conspiracy ideas came up. They were worse than the ones we talked about earlier in the video. A popular idea is that Princess Diana was killed because she was pregnant with Mohammed Dodi Fayyad's baby and they were about to get married. As Christians, some people think that the British royal family would not be able to handle Diana, the mother of the future king, being with an Egyptian Muslim. According to this idea, the royal family would not allow such a relationship to happen. Dodi's dad, Mohammed Al Fayed, really believed this idea. During the inquest into Diana's death in February 2008, he made the same claims again in court. Among those he blamed were Prince Philip and Prince Charles, who later became King Charles III, Diana's sister Lady Sarah McCorquodale, and others. He said they were planning to kill Diana and his son. Jeffrey Steinberg from the Executive Intelligence Review has another idea. He says that Princess Diana was killed by security services acting on orders from Prince Philip. This thought of a planned murder has been spread by the heir, which is linked to the Lyndon LaRouche movement in the United States. The heir's conspiracy ideas were written about in the Daily Telegraph in 1998. The story also made hints that the heir and Mohammed Alabama Fayed may have had ties in the past. Furthermore, reporter Francis Ween pointed out in 1999 that Al Fayed's spokesman had told reporters to talk to Steinberg about these ideas. People are still arguing and guessing about how Princess Diana died based on these ideas. Some people still think there was more to the terrible accident than what the authorities have found, linking the different claims and links that Al Fayed and others have made. What people have thought about these ideas in particular has been mixed. Given how controversial Diana's life and relationships were, some people think they are possible. Others don't believe them and prefer the official answers that came from the investigations in France and Britain. For people who love Princess Diana, these conspiracy ideas have made them feel bad. Even though her family and friends have lost her, they have also had to deal with all the rumors and claims about her death. In TV interviews, Al Fayed said that Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed were going to say they were getting married on September 1st, 1997, which was the Monday after the crash. But the investigation called Operation Paget pointed out that the princess's important statement would have been a worldwide event that would have needed a lot of planning. However, there was no proof to back up the claim that plans had been made for such a statement. At the inquest, CCTV video showed that Dodi had only a catalog with her when she left Rapace Jewelers on August 30th. Putting question on his claim that he had bought an engagement ring, in 2003, Alberto Raposi first said that the ring had been put on Diana's finger in a hotel in St. Tropez and was now being resized so that it could be picked up in Paris. But he later said that he had received court papers from Al Fayed, a longtime client, that told a different story. Al Fayed said that Monte Carlo was where the ring was picked out. It had been changed, and they got it in Paris the day before they died. This story went against what a shop worker said and what CCTV video showed, which showed a Ritz-Carlton employee choosing a ring that Mohammed Alabama Fayed later bought after his death. Several pieces of evidence, such as CCTV recordings and witness statements, have been looked at and found to be inconsistent with what Al Fayed said about the engagement and the ring buy. These differences have made people less sure about the rumors that Diana and Dodi are going to say they are engaged. It's not over yet, there's more. In the afternoon of August 30th, just a few hours before the terrible crash, Diana called her friend and fellow reporter Richard Kay to ask what the Sunday papers might have in store for her. During this talk, Diana did not say anything about any announcements she was going to make soon. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's older sister, testified that she had talked on the phone with Diana on Friday, August 29th. This may have been even more important. Lady Sarah said that Diana talked about Dodi Fayed in a way that made it sound like their relationship was having trouble during this chat. People who knew Diana well, like her butler Paul Burrell, her friend Lady Annabelle Goldsmith, and her spiritual guide Rita Rogers all remembered talking to her in the week before she died. After talking it over, everyone agreed that Diana was set on not getting engaged or married to anyone at that point in her life. These accounts give us a picture of Diana's mood in the days before the tragedy. They show that, contrary to some theories and rumors, she wasn't thinking about getting engaged or married. The things Diana did with her close family and friends in the days before the crash give us useful clues about how she was feeling and how she felt about Dodi Fayed. She did tell her sister that she was worried about her relationship with Dodi, but there were no signs that they were going to get married. People who were close to Diana have said over and over again that she was strongly against getting married or engaged at that point in her life. In fact, after many years, there was strong evidence to disprove the pregnancy idea. John Burton, who used to be the coroner of the Queen's household, told The Times in January 2004 that he had helped with the study of Princess Diana's body at Fulham Mortuary after she had died. During the test, Burton looked inside her womb and decided that she was not pregnant at the time of her death. The autopsy's chief examiner, Robert Chapman, agreed with Burton's conclusions and said that Diana's stomach and ovaries did not show any signs of pregnancy. Operation Paget, an investigation team, started scientific studies on pre-transfusion blood found in the footwell of Princess Diana's seat in the crashed Mercedes. This was done to answer Mohammed Alabama Fade's claims. The goal of these tests was to find the HCG hormone, which is linked to pregnancy. However, the blood samples did not show any amounts of this hormone, which is more proof that Diana was not pregnant at the time of the crash. In addition to the scientific research, Operation Paget talked to a lot of people who were close to Diana and had been talking to her a lot in the weeks before she died. A lot of the private information gathered from these interviews wasn't included in Operation Paget's official criminal investigation report, but Diana's friends were said to have said she was having her regular periods and there were even signs she was using birth control. She was the Princess of Wales, and there is a statue of her in the Sunken Garden at Kensington Palace in London to honor and remember her. On the 20th anniversary of her death, her two boys, William and Harry, made this statue as a tribute. Sculptor Ian Rank Broadley was given the job of designing and making the statue, and Pitt Morrison was in charge of putting it in the garden, which had been redesigned just for this reason. The public was first told about the statue as a tribute to Diana on July 1st, 2021, which would have been her 60th birthday. What do you think about her death now that we've talked about it? Do you think it was a mistake or a well-thought-out plan to kill someone? Type your ideas in the box below. Don't forget to click the like button if you liked the video. Tell your friends and family about it and subscribe to our channel to know when we post something new.